their spending and their costs, then we've not helped students much at all.
Michelle Cooper from the Institute of Higher Education Policy, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now we'll take you live to the House floor.
The House will be in order. The Chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., December 1st, 2011. I hereby appoint the Honorable Alan B. West to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, John A. Boehner, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House, January 5th, 2011, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with each party limited to 1 hour and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip limited to 5 minutes each. But in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. At this time, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McNerney, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to address the budget gridlock that's ripping Washington apart. Like every American who cares about the future of our great country, I'm upset by the rapid partisan fighting. But I also know that the responsibility is not equally shared. For proof, look no further than the collapse of the Deficit Supercommittee. Washington Republicans' refusal to ask the wealthiest people and the biggest corporations to contribute their fair share caused the Supercommittee's failure and is putting our country at risk. Middle-class families are struggling, but the world's biggest corporations make huge profits and exploit tax loopholes to send jobs overseas. And the rich keep getting richer, but are contributing less. This inequality is unacceptable, and it hurts Americans' economy. For instance, the after-tax income of the top 1% rose 281% from 1979 to 2007, but their total average federal tax rate fell by nearly 8 points. Unfortunately, Washington Republicans have made clear that they will not fix the injustices in our tax code. In fact, 238 members of the House and 41 senators, almost all of them Republicans, have signed the infamous Americans for Tax Reform pledge. This pledge commits its signers to oppose any plan, no matter how responsible, that would ask the wealthiest people to contribute their fair share. Whether motivated by extremist ideology or commitments to greedy special interests, the facts are clear. Republicans who sign this pledge cannot take the steps our country needs to get our budget in order. Republicans came to power on a mission to rein in the budget deficit, a goal that we all support. But instead of supporting balanced policies, Washington Republicans forced the Congress to pass a dangerous budget agreement, and thanks to them, our hands are tied. If Washington Republicans keep refusing to compromise, massive cuts will kick in that will harm the middle class. Washington Republicans won't negotiate and won't come up with a fair budget plan. Instead of helping the middle class, Republicans are standing up for the mega-rich. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, the plan put forward by Republicans on the Deficit Supercommittee shifts even more of the tax burden from the rich to the middle class. Their plan would change the tax tables in a way that benefits the wealthiest households more than the rest of us, which is what the chart next to me shows. As your income grows, so do your benefits. The wealthiest households will get more and more benefit. And their proposal dramatically weakens a variety of tax policies that help the middle class. I can't support a plan like that, and the American people can't either. Democrats and Republicans should be working together on fair solutions, but the Republicans' unwillingness to compromise is making this goal impossible. We can find solutions that will reduce the debt and keep taxes low for small businesses and middle-class families, but only if the Republicans stop protecting tax breaks for the super-rich. When I took my oath of office, I pledged to protect and defend the Constitution, and I am committed to helping the middle class, getting our economy back on track. Democrats have demonstrated a willingness to talk about difficult subjects like entitlement reform, but Republicans refuse to negotiate. So I ask my Republican colleagues, especially those who have signed the ATR pledge, a simple question. Where do your loyalties lie? With the super rich and the special interests, or with the hardworking Americans? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Brown, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He turned Georgia football games into larger-than-life experiences. He awakened excitement and pinpointed fear in the depths of Dog fan souls and shouted out those emotions on radios statewide. His voice will go down in history as the soundtrack of some of the most famous play calls, highlight reels, and moments for UGA that will simply never be forgotten. Whether it was his describing the sugar falling out of the sky or begging the Dogs to hunker down one more last time, Larry Munson had an unmatched ability to find words for feelings that just could not be spoken. To call him an iconic play-by-play announcer for the University of Georgia football team would be a vast understatement. He was a classic city treasure, an Athens legend, and for 42 years, Larry Munson breathed life into the Sanford Stadium and made the Dogs dance. He was different from all other sportscasters. Larry Munson was very authentic. He always told it like it was, even when he had given up on a red and black win. He didn't care about political correctness, and he wasn't afraid to scream about stepping on Tennessee's face with a hobnail boot or breaking his chair, his metal steel chair with a 5-inch cushion, when Georgia beat Florida in 1980 and then went on to win the national championship. He loved Georgia football, and Georgia football loved Larry Munson, just right back. His memory will live on forever in the body of the Bulldog Nation, in the hearts of all Dog fans, and will live on between the hedges every game day. On behalf of the United States Congress, here's to you, Larry, and one of the best Dogs that Georgia has ever known, and we'll never forget. We'll miss you greatly, Larry. Go Dogs! And I yield back.
Members are reminded to address their remarks to the chair. The gentleman yields back the remaining part of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Hoyer, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before we adjourn for the year, there are a number of important items we must address. The most pressing is the expiration of unemployment benefits at the end of December. Should Congress fail to act, millions of Americans who rely on emergency unemployment compensation will begin to see their payments disappear starting in January. 2.1 million of our fellow Americans will have lost their benefits by the middle of February, and over 6 million by the end of 2012. However, we have the power to prevent that from happening by extending those benefits. These emergency benefits were put in place at the start of the recession in December of '07. And with so many Americans still out of work, now is certainly not the time to let them come to an end. The number one challenge we must address in the Congress remains job creation. Americans out of work have been doing their part to find jobs. Congress must do its part as well. Some Republicans have unfairly and incorrectly blamed those who have been laid off for their continued difficulty finding jobs. However, there are over 4 people looking for every 1 job that is available. At the same time, there are nearly 7 million fewer jobs today than there were in 2007. Instead of blaming the victims, we ought to work together Democrats and Republicans, to find solutions. Congress has never allowed emergency unemployment benefits to lapse with our jobless rate anywhere close to where it is today. If it did, over 17,000 people in my state of Maryland would see their lifeline cut off by February. In Ohio, Speaker Boehner's state, 80,000 people are at risk. Among African Americans, Latinos, and other minorities, a disproportionate number have been affected by long-term unemployment and are especially vulnerable if these benefits were to end. Every state would see more Americans who are out of work slip into poverty. Local communities would be affected, too, with residual job losses. The Economic Policy Institute has estimated that allowing these benefits to expire would cost us another 500,000 jobs, 500,000. I sincerely hope that Republicans will work with us to prevent so many Americans from being left out in the cold as they continue to seek jobs but can't find them. It's long past the time that they start working with us to pass a real jobs plan to get Americans back to work and grow our economy. The President put a jobs bill on our desk in September. It is now December. We've yet to see that bill or any other jobs bill put on this House floor by the Republican leadership. Democrats have multiple jobs plans on the table. The President's Americans Jobs Act and the House Democrats' Make It in America plan. Both will help create jobs right away and invest in long-term economic competitiveness. If Republicans continue to be unwilling to work with us on a plan to create jobs, I hope they will at least work with us to pass a measure that will prevent further losses as a result of the expiring unemployment benefits. I strongly urge my Republican friends to help us stop the looming and entirely preventable disaster of millions having no support. It is the responsibility we have to our constituents and to those looking to us for leadership during this challenging time. Let us not go home. Let us not go to celebrate Christmas or other holidays without ensuring the extension of unemployment benefits for those Americans who cannot find jobs, notwithstanding the fact they are looking for jobs. They're counting on us. Let's be sure that their reliance was well placed. And I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's always great to follow the highly respected Minority Whip, and he is highly respected. I would say that there's a lot of pressing problems in this country. One I'll speak about today, and that's the high-level nuclear waste stored throughout this country. I would also say to my friend that part of the jobs bill has been passed. We passed the free trade agreement. We passed the veterans benefit portion. We passed the 3% withholding. So there has been movement in a bipartisan manner on some provisions in the bill. So now let me segue to an issue that I've come to the floor now 6 times as I go throughout the country and highlight where high-level nuclear waste is stored throughout this country. Today, we'll travel to the state of Massachusetts, right on Cape Cod Bay, where the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant sits. Again, it's right on Cape Cod Bay. At Pilgrim, there are over 2,918 spent fuel assemblies on site. Yucca Mountain, which is the defined storage location by law in the 1982 Nuclear Waste Policy Act, currently has no nuclear waste on site. I like to keep highlighting the real distinct differences based upon the years of talking about this issue and highlighting some of the arguments against Yucca, comparing it to where we have nuclear waste today. So let's again continue to look at the Pilgrim Power Plant. The waste is stored above ground in pools, very similar to Fukushima Daiichi in Japan. At Yucca, the waste will be stored 1,000 feet underground, above the ground in pools, 1,000 feet underground. I think Yucca is a better location. At Pilgrim, the waste is 20 feet from the water table, 20 feet. At Yucca, it would be 1,000 feet above the water table. I think that's a better, more safe and secure location. And you can see the Pilgrim plant is right on Cape Cod Bay, right next to the water. Yucca Mountain is situated 100 miles from really the nearest body of water, which would be the Colorado River. Now, for those who've been following my time coming to the floor, this is my 6th time. So I started at Hanford, a DOE facility in Washington State, compared it to Yucca Mountain. I then went to Zion. I got my friend from Chicago right here. Zion's right on Lake Michigan. It's a nuclear power plant that has decommissioned plant waste still stored on site. But Wisconsin has 2 nuclear power plants right on Lake Michigan. Then I went to Savannah, Georgia, to talk about the nuclear waste there. And, of course, it's the Savannah River, so it's right next to the Savannah River. Then out to California to look at Santa Onofre, the nuclear power plant that's right on the Pacific Ocean. Before today, then I went to Idaho and looked at the Idaho National Labs and the nuclear waste stored there. Today we go to Massachusetts. The point being, there's high-level nuclear waste stored all over this country. And a single repository at Yucca Mountain makes sense for all the right reasons. It's over 100 miles from the largest city. It's in the desert. It would be underneath a mountain. There is no more safe, secure location. Why are we not moving forward? Because this administration has decided not to spend the money needed to finish the final environmental study through the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So where are our senators on this position? And I've been bringing this down to the floor through all these states. We need 60 votes in the Senate to secure America's nuclear waste. Right now, through the states, based upon the states we've identified, there's 20 yes. We've got about 7 who are relatively new. We don't know their position. Of course, we have established 5 that are no's. There are some in the New England states that I mentioned. Susan Collins voted for Yucca Mountain in 2002. Olympia Snowe voted for it in 2002. Senator Kerry voted against it. Now Pilgrim is in the state of Massachusetts. I guess Senator Kerry feels that Pilgrim is a more safe and secure location than Yucca Mountain, based upon his statement. Scott Brown has no position yet. Senator Ayotte has no position. Senator Sheehan has no position. And, of course, the independent from Vermont has voted no. And I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Moore, for 5 minutes.
And thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. Recently, even today, we've heard a lot from both sides about the extension of unemployment insurance from both sides of the aisles. But I think the voices that we need to be listening to are the voices of the American people. And so if you would indulge me, Mr. Speaker, I would like to read a letter from one of my constituents. Ms. Moore, I am writing you today to request that you pass the extension for unemployment insurance benefits. I'm a single mom and experienced a layoff at my job this past summer. My benefits are about to run out, and I'm still looking for a job. Last week alone, I applied to over 20 jobs online and received only 1 call back for an interview. I have $600 left to claim on unemployment. After that, I do not know what I am going to do. I pray every day that this extension will go through before the holidays. That is all I want for Christmas. Being unemployed has left me with a sense of low self-worth. and I find that I cry all of the time. I hope that my interview next week is successful. Nonetheless, I'm trying to be proactive on the job hunt. I have a webinar scheduled today for successful interviewing skills, and I'm hoping to apply those skills in my interview next week. I just want some peace of mind that I will continue to receive the extension before the holiday. Sadly, this young woman is just one of 58,000 Wisconsinites who will lose benefits if we don't extend the unemployment insurance. And of course, there are millions of stories like this across the country, hard-working Americans, Mr. Speaker, who just want the opportunity to have an opportunity. And as the holidays approach, the harsh realities of our failed economy become more and more prevalent. I, along with all of my Democratic colleagues, have been calling for the passage of an extension of UI benefits for what seems like an eternity. Yet some would turn their backs on their fellow Americans during the holidays and in these most trying of economic times. Like the Grinch that stole Christmas, Republican majority with devilish grins are tipping through Whoville, or in this case across the country, attempting to steal the holiday cheer from hard-working Americans with these tortured rationales as to why they oppose these much and desperately needed benefits, while continuing simultaneously to work to ensure that the rich get richer through maintaining tax cuts. The unemployment insurance program serves as a lifeline for millions of unemployed Americans and their families, their children, who are now at the mercy of the worst job market since the Great Depression. Millions of hard-working Americans, nearly 2 million in just January alone, and over 6 million in 2012, will be cut off from the emergency lifeline that is unemployment insurance unless Congress acts. Mr. Speaker, these are Americans who've been laid off and are desperately searching for work. But the jobs just are not there. That is why we must pass the Doggett Levin Unemployment Compensation Extension Act. The Emergency Unemployment Compensation Extension Act is just common sense. And it will continue the current federal unemployment programs through next year. The extension of these benefits will not only strengthen the safety net for the unemployed, but it will most importantly promote economic recovery by preventing the loss of 500,000 jobs. Additionally, relieving insolvent states from interest payments on federal loans for 1 year will help the states, including Wisconsin, which were forced to borrow funds from the federal government in order to pay for unemployment benefits of the thousands of unemployed or laid off. Never before now has this been a partisan issue where Congress, controlled by either party, has denied this life-sustaining unemployment benefit. Right now, we need a holiday miracle. We need a miracle to help these Grinches grow hearts and vote immediately to extend the unemployment insurance program. I call on my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, to come together this season and bring some holiday cheer back to the American people. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back the balance of her time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick, for 5 minutes.
Request to revise and extend.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to honor one of the Bucks County Bar Association's most ardent supporters, my dear friend Tom Mellon. Tom is known by many around the country for his passion and commitment to the law, but is equally known in the Bucks County area as a dedicated civil servant who has spent his entire life giving back to the community. I've known Tom for many years, and although we come from different party backgrounds, it has never gotten in the way of our friendship. Our shared values have always trumped politics. First and foremost, Tom is a family man. He's a loyal husband to Sarah and a dedicated father to 4 sons, Thomas, Christopher, Ryan, and Henry. Tom is also one of the friendliest people you will ever meet. He has a genuine personality and a warm, welcoming demeanor, which have served him well throughout his career. Tom always seems to carry with him an inner Irish spirit. From day one, he has championed the underdog and the downtrodden, which is truly an admirable quality. Throughout the course of his legal career, Tom has been the David to many a corporation's Goliath, taking on big tobacco, multiple pharmaceutical companies, and even global terrorists. He never wavers in his dedication to his clients or to his cause. His cases are taken not necessarily because he knows he can win, but because morally they are the right thing to do. Tom is truly an inspiration to many young aspiring attorneys who want to change the world. He has been to me. As Tom sees it, his life duty is to help those who are in need. He launched his legal career representing the interests of victims of crime in the United States Attorney's Office, and he has never looked back. Today, he continues his representation of the less fortunate, proudly serving as a trial attorney in Doylestown, Pennsylvania. After 9/11, Tom served as a lead counsel among a national consortium of attorneys who were retained by families of the victims of the terrorist attacks in order to pursue an investigation into the involvement of Iran and al-Qaeda. In 1999, Tom arranged for the first group of American lawyers to visit Havana, Cuba, in order to better understand the culture of the land and the inner struggles of the Cuban people. Currently, Tom also serves on the board of directors of the Bucksmont Katrina Relief Project and has raised millions of dollars for the victims of Hurricane Katrina in Hancock County, Mississippi. As part of this mission, Tom has led over 100 attorneys and their family members on multiple trips to Hancock County to clean up the devastation, rebuild homes, and assist in the construction of new community buildings like a food pantry and an animal shelter. Tom's morals and decorum permeate every aspect of his life. His loyalty is unwavering and unparalleled, whether it be to family, friends, employees, or clients. His dedication to the community speaks volumes about who Tom is as a person. He's a kind, giving, unique individual, and I'm truly blessed to have called him a friend for so many years and to honor him today as he will be honored tonight at the Bucks County Bar Association. Mr. Speaker, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Ohio, Ms. Kaptur, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's no secret that Wall Street is rampant with cases of outright fraud, backroom deals, and very, very special political access. Meanwhile, Main Street is pushing back hard against this tide by investing in our communities and struggling to create jobs so our economy can grow. A steady series of probing news stories have begun to expose the depth of corruption that precipitated the Wall Street meltdown and why it is so hard for Main Street to recover. Bloomberg just released a story detailing how the former Secretary of Treasury, Hank Paulson, provided special insider information to well-connected Wall Street executives in July of 2008, just before the meltdown. According to Bloomberg, on the very same day the former secretary told the New York Times that he expected the examinations of the Federal Reserve and the Office of Comptroller of the Currency into Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would give, and I quote, give a signal of confidence to the markets. He informed a select group of his friends on Wall Street later in the day that in reality there was a plan for placing, and I quote, Fannie and Freddie into conservatorship, which amounts to a government seizure. Those firms got insider information. And one can ask, did they then place bets to protect their interests? I bet they did. One of the fund managers in that meeting said, and I quote, he was shocked that Paulson would furnish such specific information, leaving little doubt that the Treasury Department would carry out that plan. In the words of William Black, law expert at the University of Missouri, there is no legitimate reason for these disclosures. The Secretary of Treasury is supposed to be a public steward of our nation's financial well-being. But when he told the public one story and then shared the inside track with his friends and colleagues from Goldman Sachs and other large firms, he broke that trust. To be blunt, this is self-serving crony capitalism at its worst. This is hardly the only case of special treatment of Wall Street insiders by Washington. Insiders like Paulson, who had been the former head of Goldman Sachs. Earlier this week, we saw a U.S. District Court throw out a settlement between the Securities and Exchange Commission and Citigroup. In 2008, Citigroup reportedly created, marketed, and sold a fund to investors. What Citigroup did not disclose is that the bank itself was actually betting against their own fund. This fraudulent deal made Citigroup $160 million while costing the fund investors $700 million in losses and counting. The SEC's response to this fraud was a $285 million settlement, slightly more than a third of the reported losses incurred by the victims of this fraud. Citigroup was not even required to admit any wrongdoing. The judge was absolutely correct to throw this case out. The SEC's policy of allowing large Wall Street firms to walk away from fraud cases without so much as admitting any wrongdoing is completely inappropriate and invites more corruption. Growing reports of fraud are staggering, and they underlie the Wall Street dealing that has so harmed our nation. Throughout November, we saw headline after headline of how MF Global took money from its own private customer accounts as it tried to stay afloat in the days before it filed one of the largest bankruptcies in American history. There may be as much as $1.2 billion unaccounted for. We used to call that stealing. The fact is, our Justice Department has only a handful of FBI agents to properly investigate the volume of corruption infecting our markets. After reviewing the FBI's own testimonies, I introduced H.R. 1350, the Financial Crisis Criminal Investigation Act, to authorize an additional 1,000 FBI agents and forensic experts to prosecute white-collar crime, especially Wall Street. Back in the 1990s, when we had the S&L crisis, we had 1,000 agents. When this crisis started, there were but a handful because they'd all been switched to terrorism investigations. When you look at these cases, what is astounding is just how well connected so many of these institutions on Wall Street are to the corridors of power in Washington. It now appears even former Speaker Newt Gingrich was paid millions of dollars by Freddie Mac before it went bankrupt. At a minimum, our nation needs an independent commission to investigate what actions led to the eventual collapse of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, by which Wall Street turned over all of its toxic mortgage paper to the taxpayers of the United States for the next 3 generations. I have a bill to do just that, H.R. 2093. I ask other members of the House to sponsor the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac Criminal Investigative Commission Act. So, while real justice for Wall Street languishes in places from Cleveland to Toledo, the real America is trying to create jobs. But it's time for Washington to get its house in order to restore accountability to Wall Street so that full confidence can be restored to our economy. Exacting justice for Wall Street is long overdue. Mr. Speaker, I yield back my remaining time.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Young, for 5 minutes. Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak on behalf of the overwhelming majority of my southern Indiana constituents. Now, a year ago, they sent me to this body to give a voice to their frustrations with Washington, a frustration I shared then and share now more than ever. The American people's frustration stems from a lack of real progress in addressing our nation's most fundamental challenges: federal spending, our national debt, job creation, the decline of the middle class. Now, our fellow citizens have concluded what I too have concluded: Washington is broken, and no one is in a hurry to fix it. Now, Congress hasn't passed a balanced budget in over a decade. The Senate hasn't passed any sort of budget in 3 years. Our national debt recently topped $15 trillion, and our unemployment rate hovers around 9%. Instead of trying to fix our problems, Washington would rather argue about who's to blame for causing our problems. Now, sure, there's a lot of agreement as to what's wrong with our country, but not a lot of action geared towards making anything right. Our president and too many in this Congress would rather demagogue and demonize than lead and legislate. Washington is broken, and nobody's in a hurry to fix it. While many of our constituents are struggling to find a second, and in some cases a third job, Washington is failing to perform its only job: governing. Is it any wonder that so many Americans are frustrated? Now, these aren't Republican problems, Democrat problems. They're not House problems or Senate problems. These are Washington problems. Unfortunately, after 11 months on the job, I've seen far too few Washington solutions.
Many of us came to Washington this year, some of us new to government, to offer solutions. We came ready with ideas. We came ready to defend those ideas, to respond to criticisms, to make the ideas into workable solutions, and ultimately to implement those solutions to make a better life for those who sent us here. We came with the same sense of urgency that the American people expect of us. But Washington is broken. Too many people in this city resist publicly committing to hard, workable solutions because parroting talking points is so much easier. But until we get down to brass tacks, we'll continue to talk past one another. So I make this entreaty to all of my colleagues. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, commit to proposing workable solutions. Get into the details. Put them on paper. Until both sides put a specific, written, scorable plan on the table, we'll never find the common ground necessary to strike that grand bargain. In the absence of specifics, we're just playing politics. That's why Washington is broken. Now, earlier this year, those of us on the Budget Committee introduced a comprehensive plan that would reduce our deficit over the next decade by over $6 trillion. It would balance the budget and start paying down our debt. It would create an environment where jobs could flourish and grow. And it would save and strengthen our safety net programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Most importantly, it addressed our challenges with the sense of urgency they require. Now, if you disagreed with that plan, or you have a more optimal solution, let's hear it. Introduce it. I'm open to better plans. I didn't come to Congress because I thought I had all the solutions. I came to Congress because my constituents wanted me to be part of the solution. But criticizing the other guy's plan is not the same as having a plan. Real leadership consists of presenting your vision for America to the American people and then defending it. In so doing, Republicans and Democrats may discover that we have some common ground. We are not enemies, but friends. Let us summon up, as we have before, the better angels of our nature and rededicate ourselves to the hard work of leadership. Washington is indeed broken. Let's hurry up and fix it together. With that, Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Hinojosa, for 5 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 5 minutes.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, it is with great sadness that I rise to urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to pass the American Dream Act. This past weekend, I learned of the tragic death of Joaquin Luna, a senior student at Juarez Lincoln High School in Mission, Texas, who took his life because he believed that he would never be able to fulfill his dream of becoming an engineer, earning his citizenship, and leading a full and prosperous life in America. Brought to the United States as an infant, Joaquin attended our nation's public schools, played the guitar at his church, and hoped to go to college and achieve the American dream. I cannot express the sorrow I feel on the loss of such a talented young man. I want to extend my heartfelt condolences to Joaquin's family and friends. I cannot imagine the pain they are suffering. It is heartbreaking to know that many of us in the U.S. House of Representatives passed the DREAM Act at this time last year, to see the legislation held up in the Senate by a vote of 55 to 41. Today, as Joaquin Luna's body is laid to rest, I believe it is imperative to underscore the urgency of passing the DREAM Act in the 112th Congress and renewing hope for DREAM students. As a proud co-sponsor of H.R. 1842, entitled the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act of 2011, better known as the DREAM Act. I urge President Obama and my colleagues in the House and the Senate to put their ideological differences aside and do what is right. Now more than ever, we must give these young people an opportunity to pursue their college and career goals, resolve their immigration status, and earn their citizenship. The DREAM Act would allow these students the opportunity to earn legal status if they were 15 years old or younger when they were brought to this country, to America. If they are long-term U.S. residents and have lived in the United States for at least 5 years before the enactment of the law, have good moral character, graduate from high school or obtain a GED, and complete 2 years of college or military service, and that they are in good standing. Having been brought by their parents to the United States as children, these young men and women know America as their home. Without question, DREAM students exemplify the best of American ideals, such as hard work, perseverance, and the desire to contribute to our nation's workforce, economy, and civic life. In the Rio Grande Valley of Deep South Texas and across the country, DREAM students have excelled in school and have become valedictorians and advanced placement scholars and student leaders despite facing difficult circumstances. As ranking member for the Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Training, I have no doubt that the DREAM students can help America achieve President Obama's ambitious high school and college completion goals by the year 2020. Many of these students are working tirelessly to earn their high school and college diplomas and aspire to become professionals in the sectors of our workforce which need their talent, their skills, and their ingenuity. In the areas of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, that are known as STEM, our country must train a new generation of high-skilled scientists, engineers, and mathematicians to bolster scientific discovery and spur technological innovation. Simply stated, these talented youth can help our nation increase its global competitiveness and be the innovators of tomorrow. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back the remainder of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the Sierra foothills in northeastern California lies the little town of Colfax, a population 1,800 with a median household income of about $35,000. Over the last several years, this little town has been utterly plundered by regulatory and litigatory excesses that have pushed this little town to the edge of bankruptcy and ravaged families already struggling to make ends meet. You see, Colfax operates a small wastewater treatment plant for its residents that discharges into the Smothers Ravine. Because it does so, it operates within the provisions of the Clean Water Act, a measure adopted in 1972 and rooted in legitimate concerns to protect our vital water resources. The problem is that predatory environmental law firms have now discovered how to take unconscionable advantage of that law to reap windfall profits at the expense of working-class families like the townspeople of Colfax. In the case of Colfax, an environmental law firm demanded every document pertaining to the water treatment plant from the date of its inception. It then pored over those documents looking for any possible violation, including mere paperwork errors. By law, those documents include self-monitoring reports by the water agency itself, and any violation, no matter how minor, establishes a cause of action for which the law provides no affirmative defense, even if the violations due to factors completely beyond the local community's control
including acts of God and acts by unrelated and uncontrollable third parties. Prove one such violation, and remember, the law allows for no affirmative defense, and you've just guaranteed the attorneys all of their fees, which in this case were billed at $550 per hour. As a result of this predatory activity, the town of Colfax is facing legal fees alone that exceed the town's entire annual budget. Families that are struggling to keep afloat just above the poverty level are fleeced by attorneys charging $550 an hour. But that's just part of the problem. The law requires constant upgrading of facilities to meet ever-changing, state-of-the-art regulations that have nothing to do with health and safety and with absolutely no concern for the prohibitive costs involved. In fact, Colfax is now required to discharge water certifiably cleaner than the natural stream water into which it is discharged. In Colfax's case, this required a $15 million expenditure divided among 800 working-class residents who are now paying $2,500 per year just for their water connections. And once this town has met the standard, there's no guarantee that in 5 years it won't be told, sorry, the rules have changed and you'll need to start over. Mr. Speaker, it's time to restore some form of rationality back to this law and to stop the plunder of small towns like Colfax. And Colfax isn't alone. Any community that operates a wastewater treatment plant is in the same jeopardy. No one disputes that we need to maintain and enforce sensible and cost-effective protections of our precious water resources. But legitimate environmental protections must no longer be used as an excuse for regulatory extremism and litigatory plundering of our local communities. Today I'm introducing legislation to offer 6 reforms to protect other communities from going through the same nightmare as the people of Colfax. First, to limit private party lawsuits to issues of significant noncompliance rather than harmless paperwork errors. Second, to shield local agencies from liability for acts that are beyond their control. Third, to give local agencies 60 days to cure a violation before legal action can be initiated. Fourth, to allow communities to amortize the cost of new facilities over a period of 15 years before new requirements can be heaped on them. Fifth, to require a cost-benefit analysis before new regulations can be imposed. And sixth, to limit attorney fees to the prevailing fees of the community. Like many movements, the impetus for stronger environmental protection of our air and water was firmly rooted in legitimate concerns to protect these vital resources. But like so many movements, as it succeeded in its legitimate ends, it also attracted a self-interested constituency that is driven far past the borders of common sense and into the realms of political extremism and outright plunder. And I'm hopeful that we're now entering an era when common sense can be restored to environmental law in this session of the Congress. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On February 2009, tragedy struck Western New York when Continental Connection Flight 3407 crashed outside of Buffalo. The National Transportation Safety Board found that one of the principal causes of the crash was pilot fatigue. So Congress passed landmark aviation legislation to reform the system. One of the key provisions required that the Federal Aviation Administration update flight and duty time rules and set minimum rest requirements for airline pilots by August 1st, 2011. Congressional intent was clear. That should have been enough time. After all, the National Transportation Safety Board had urged that pilot fatigue rules be updated for the past 20 years. Getting it right is also about getting it done. Yet, here we are today, 16 months after Congress asked the Federal Aviation Administration to issue these reforms and 4 months past the deadline we gave them, and still no pilot fatigue rule. That is unacceptable to me. That is unacceptable to my colleagues from Western New York, and that is unacceptable to the flying public. I urge the Federal Aviation Administration to complete the pilot fatigue rule immediately, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Olson, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I respectfully request permission to address the House for 5 minutes. A unanimous consent provided and extended.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, at a time when our nation's economy is struggling to recover from our deepest recession, in which millions of Americans are looking for work, no one would believe that we would forgo an opportunity to reduce our reliance on Middle Eastern oil and create thousands of American jobs. Incredibly, that's exactly what happened after the White House announced they would delay a decision on approval of the Keystone XL pipeline until 2013, after the elections of November 2012. At a time when our President faced a difficult choice between powers within his base, labor unions, and radical environmentalists, he chose to punt rather than lead. Labor unions support construction of the Keystone XL pipeline because they understand this project has been deemed safe and will create 20,000 direct American jobs and thousands more indirect jobs across our nation as the pipeline is built. But radical environmentalists and Hollywood activists vehemently oppose the project. In fact, they surrounded the White House in protest of the Keystone XL pipeline, claiming that the project is not environmentally safe. While these protesters made catchy headlines, their claims about the Keystone pipeline surely aren't true. The Keystone XL project has been studied extensively for over 3 years. When TransCanada originally filed an application for a presidential permit with the Department of State. The presidential permit review process was conducted by the State Department, the Environmental Protection Agency, and many other agencies within the federal government. After 3 years of comprehensive review and several changes to the project to accommodate environmental concerns, the final report to the White House incorporated 57 project-specific special conditions for the design, construction, and operation of the Keystone XL pipeline. In simple terms, the Keystone XL pipeline was designed to be the safest pipeline the world has ever known. Here's the truth why the Keystone XL pipeline promises to be the safest pipeline ever. As proposed, the Keystone XL pipeline will be monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year with the most advanced technologies. It will be buried at a deeper depth than similar pipelines to minimize risk. It will utilize multiple leak detection methods and fail-safe shutoff systems, as well as having an emergency response program in place ready to respond if needed. Critics of the project further claim that the crude transported by the Keystone XL pipeline is highly corrosive, toxic sludge. This is a claim that can only come out of Hollywood, with no facts to support it. Independent analysis and sound science have determined these oils are not corrosive to steel. Canadian oil is already shipped safely across the United States via other Canadian pipelines. Good old-fashioned common sense tells us that no company would try to destroy its own interests by spending billions to construct a pipeline that is going to be eaten up by the very products it transports. I'll wrap up my comments with the facts about the Keystone XL pipeline. This project has been exhaustively studied and revised to ensure its safety. 3 years of grueling review and detailed analysis by multiple federal government agencies have concluded that construction and use of the Keystone pipeline is safe. In August, our Department of State recommended that President Obama approve the Keystone XL pipeline. Our economy is still teetering on a recession. It needs to be strengthened, and we need a safe, reliable supply of energy to grow it. Canada can't provide it. They want to provide it, thereby reducing our reliance on Middle Eastern oil and strengthening our national security, which we have strengthened energy security as a result.
Gentleman's time has expired.
Thousands of jobs will be created to build this pipeline. Madam Speaker, I urge the President to approve the Keystone XL pipeline now. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from New York, Mr. Rangel, for 5 minutes.
I ask unanimous consent that I address the House for 5 minutes.
Without objection, sir.
Thank you. My colleagues, I once again rise asking that we immediately consider extending the Federal Unemployment Compensation Act. It seems as though I walked into this movie before last year, and we were begging once again that we throw away the labels of being Democrat or Republican and reach out to make an appeal as to what makes this country different from other countries. This is the only country in the world that no one wants to leave and everyone wants to come in. And it's not because of the differences we have with the rich and the poor. It's that always in this country we extended hope. We allowed people to believe that they were never really, truly alone. And when we find a circumstance that Americans, hard-working Americans, trying to fulfill that American dream, once again, not to become a Wall Street broker, and certainly not to be living a life of poverty, but to join that middle class that has been the engine for hope and economic advancement for our country. And we find a situation now, through no fault of their own, these dreams have been shattered. People have not only lost their jobs, but they've lost their self-esteem, they've lost their savings, they've not been able to take their kids to college. And so what is it that we can do, since it's abundantly clear that in this Congress there is a gridlock? And we don't want you to lose hope, because there's things that Americans can do. It's not just waiting for this Congress to act, because you hold in your hands the power to control this Congress. And we should not have to wait until next year in order to say that you can express yourself at the polls. No, indeed. Every member of Congress, 435 of us here, are anxiously waiting for your call, and I hope that call would be a call of compassion. It should be a call from our ministers, from our Catholics and Protestants and Jews and synagogues and Mormons and Muslims, in saying that in America we should not have the vulnerable carrying the pain of mistakes that have been made. We should be hearing from our civic leaders and our voters and calling Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, saying we did not send you to Washington to display just what a good Republican you are or what a good Democrat you are. We should talk about this sign up here, "In God We Trust." Doesn't that mean something about taking care of the vulnerable, the unemployed, those without homes, without jobs, and without hope? Doesn't it mean that we have a tradition as members of Congress? And doesn't it mean that our voters have a responsibility not to just say how bad we are, but to say how good they are for making certain that they're monitoring our conduct, not through a poll, but through our action? The question is, how did your congressman vote on extending unemployment compensation? And rather than wait for the good or bad news, call now, call today, call every day this week. They'll never have a Thanksgiving or Christmas that they used to have, but they can't give up hope. They can't give in, and they can't give up. And so I am saying for America, you don't have